The Westall UFO encounter, Australia's mass school, citing over 200 students and teachers watched a silver craft land behind their school, then were silenced by authorities who arrived within hours. Long before the age of smartphones and viral videos, before the internet could amplify witness testimony across continents in seconds, a silvery green craft descends from the clear Australian sky over a suburban Melbourne schoolyard. The date is April 6, 1966. The time is approximately 11 o'clock in the morning. Over 200 students and teachers watch as the impossible becomes undeniably real. The location is Clayton South, Victoria, a quiet suburb where two schools sit adjacent to each other, Westall High School and Westall State School. Between them stretches the Grange Reserve, and beyond that, open paddock land dotted with tall grass. It is an ordinary Wednesday morning. Classes are in session, the sky is clear, then someone points upward. The craft that appears over Westall High School defies every conventional explanation the witnesses possess. Multiple observers describe it independently as approximately the size of two family cars placed together. Its shape registers differently to different eyes. Some perceive it as saucer-like, others as egg-shaped, but all agree on the color. Silvery green, metallic, reflecting the Australian sun in ways that rule out whether balloons, aircraft, or atmospheric phenomena. What strikes every witness, what will remain consistent across 5 decades of testimony, is the silence. The craft produces no sound, no engine roar, no mechanical hum. It moves through the air as if the laws governing conventional flight simply do not apply to its existence. The object descends, not tentatively, but deliberately. It moves lower over the school grounds, where students have begun gathering in growing numbers, pouring out of classrooms, pointing and staring. Teachers emerge. The craft continues its descent toward the paddock area behind the Grange Reserve. Some witnesses describe a second smaller object in the vicinity. Others focus entirely on the primary craft. What no witness disputes is what happens next. The object appears to touch down or rest briefly in the paddock. Then, after a pause that feels both eternal and impossibly brief, it rises again, steeply, rapidly, and departs. The moment the craft lifts away, several students make a decision that will define the documentary record of this case. They run across the reserve, through the grass, toward the paddock where the object had rested. They are young, between 11 and 15 years old, driven by curiosity that overrides caution. When they reach the landing site, they find exactly what the craft's descent suggested they would find: a circular area of flattened grass. The students who arrive first describe standing inside this circle, observing grass pressed flat in a pattern none of them have encountered before. Not trampled randomly, not crushed by conventional weight, but flattened in a manner that suggests directed force from above. Multiple witnesses report this physical trace independently. Students who did not speak to each other after the event, who would not reconnect for decades, describe the same circular impression in the same location. The grass lies flat and undisturbed by wind. The boundary between flattened and upright vegetation is distinct. Before formal documentation can occur, before photographs can be taken or measurements recorded, adults arrive. Not school staff initially, but others. Witnesses describe military and civilian personnel reaching the site shortly after the students. What happens next transforms the Westall encounter from a mass sighting into a documented case of systematic witness suppression. The students are ordered away from the landing trace. They are told, in terms that vary slightly between accounts but remain consistent in substance, not to speak about what they have seen, not to their parents, not to reporters, not to anyone. This silencing effort extends beyond the paddock. Back at the schools, teachers and administrators deliver similar messages. Students who attempt to discuss the sighting are shut down. One science teacher, who allows her students to process what they have witnessed through open discussion, faces professional consequences. Witnesses report that she is threatened with loss of her position for permitting such conversations. The suppression pattern is not random. It is organized, systematic, and remarkably consistent across witnesses who have no subsequent contact with each other. Former students who relocate to different cities, who build separate lives, who do not speak to their classmates for 30 or 40 years, independently report being told the same things. You did not see what you think you saw. It was a weather balloon. It was an aircraft. Do not discuss this with anyone. For decades, most witnesses comply. They carry the memory privately, uncertain whether speaking publicly would invite ridicule or worse. The official narrative remains silent. No government investigation produces public findings. No formal acknowledgement emerges from Victorian state authorities despite the unprecedented number of witnesses. The silence breaks in the 1990s when surviving witnesses begin speaking publicly. Shane Ryan, a teacher and researcher based in Canberra, recognizes the historical significance of the Westall case and begins the methodical work of locating witnesses. He tracks down former students, teachers, and school officials scattered across Australia. He conducts interviews, cross-references testimony, and builds a documentary record that will eventually include more than 200 independent accounts. The consistency Ryan discovers is remarkable. Witnesses separated by decades and distance describe the same silvery green craft, the same silent descent, the same landing trace. More significantly, they describe the same suppression effort, the warnings from authority figures, the threats against the science teacher, the organized attempt to ensure that what over 200 people witnessed on a clear April morning would remain officially unacknowledged. Ryan's research culminates in the documentary film Westall 66, a suburban UFO mystery released in 2010. The film brings national attention to a case that had remained largely unknown outside the immediate community. Former witnesses speak on camera, their accounts unchanged from testimony given privately years earlier. The physical details match. The emotional impact remains visible even after 4 decades. By the 50th anniversary of the encounter in 2016, the Westall case stands as Australia's most witnessed and most thoroughly documented mass UFO sighting. Over 200 individuals from 2 separate schools have provided testimony. Their accounts have been recorded, compared, and verified across 5 decades. The documentary record is unprecedented in Australian paranormal history. What makes Westall compelling beyond the sheer number of witnesses is the documented suppression effort. The systematic attempt to silence witnesses immediately after the event suggests official awareness of what occurred. Authority figures who arrived at the landing site within hours understood they were managing something significant. The consistency of the silencing pattern, reported independently by witnesses who had no contact after 1966, gives the suppression documentation a credibility that single witness accounts cannot achieve. The physical landing trace, observed by multiple students within minutes of the craft's departure, was never formally documented before it disappeared. Whether covered deliberately, disturbed accidentally, or simply lost to time remains unknown. What cannot be erased is the memory of those who stood inside that flattened circle of grass, who felt the ground where something had rested, who saw with their own eyes what conventional explanation could not address. The Victorian state government maintains official silence. No formal acknowledgement has emerged despite the 200-plus witness record. The military and civilian personnel who arrived at the paddock that April morning have never been publicly identified. The suppression effort that began within hours of the sighting remains unexplained. What persists is testimony. Over 200 voices speaking independently across 5 decades, describing the same silvery green craft, the same silent descent, the same flattened circle in the grass. Their consistency transforms the Westall encounter from anecdotal report into documentary fact. Something descended over Clayton South on April 6, 1966. Something that over 200 people witnessed. Something that authorities immediately sought to suppress. The craft departed rapidly that morning and never returned. But the memory remains, carried by witnesses who were children when they saw the impossible, who are elders now, who have maintained their accounts through decades of official silence. They remember the silvery green surface, the absolute silence, the flattened grass, and the adults who arrived to tell them they had seen nothing at all. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.